Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Bruce McDonald, and this is the Talamanca Review. It's 11:52 p.m. on the 4th of April, and it's a Friday. Let's take a look at something.
You go to hell.
All right. Let me ask you something. If the rule you followed brought you to this, of what use was the rule?
You could have the money, Anton.
And of course, that was the incredible No Country for Old Men, written by my favorite author, Cormac McCarthy, and adapted for the screen, produced and directed by my favorite writer-director brother duo, Joel and Ethan Coen. So suffice it to say, it was a glorious day for me when that movie came out. Let me just check the release, because I don't quite remember. It was 2007, but what was the release date for No Country for Old Men? November 9th, 2007, got released in the USA. 93% Rotten Tomatoes, 92% Metacritic, 8.2 on IMDb. 1,115,000 votes. So I would have been, 41 then? Yeah. I remember exactly where I was. I was living in a town called Waterloo, Ontario, and I was working for a company there as a technical writer. Now, for those of you unfamiliar with Cormac McCarthy and what makes him such an extraordinary writer in a time when writing is almost gone now as a result of the black screens that we hold in our hands and the various other ways that we communicate with each other and pass information. I'm, of course, of the belief and the bias and the prejudice that language and storytelling is the beginning and end of culture. And it may be able to be improved upon, but that would only occur when the human race becomes telepathic and can perfectly communicate with each other by projecting the raw data of our consciousness and our intent to another person so that they feel what we feel before we wrap or package those feelings in language. But until we can do that, I don't see how anything is going to surpass language. You know, I think about these computer screens and I spend a fair amount of time a day in front of a computer screen myself. Some of it for recreation, some of it for education, some of it for work to make money. And I have an iPhone 13 mini. So I'm no stranger to the digital world. I have a couple Starlink hookups here. And I don't know what more I can say about that. McCarthy is an important writer and a writer that captured a lot of people because of the poignancy of the questions that he asks and the incredible honesty with which he looked at life. Not for the faint of heart. Like the Talamanca Review. There's a lot of people who have tried to read McCarthy and they have to stop because it's not for the faint of heart. Very interesting guy, too. I've spoken about him before on my podcast. Curious connection I have with Cormac McCarthy. He's born July 20, 1933, and I'm born July 12, 1966. There are 8 leap years in that amount of time. 8 leap years. So that means if you take away the leap years, which is a very interesting equation, I give you that. McCarthy and I are born 33 years apart to the day. Now, a lot of people, they get themselves very worked up and very involved in occult understudy, metaphysical understudy, esoteric understudy. And I mean understudy the way the theater uses it, because if you get the role, you're living yourself, and the self doesn't need those things. I know I piss a lot of people off when I talk like this. I know that most of you, and I talk to a lot of you off air now, I speak to a few dozen of my listeners, not on the daily, but at least once a month, and some of you more than that. And I hear your stories, and I hear what you're into, and I hear what you've looked at, what you've inquired about, what you've studied. And it never ceases to amaze me how much time and energy people will put into a spiritual understudy. And now there's nothing wrong with understudy. Everybody who eventually makes it to the stage, whether it be the Royal Shakespeare Company in London or Broadway in New York, or the Sydney Opera House in Australia, everybody who eventually makes it there had to do their understudy. We all have to do a certain amount of understudy. And I guess what it does is it helps us chip away at the mental obstinance. And the mental obstinance is a construct that began in the 20th century. I don't think it existed much in the 19th century. And for the record, I have no accounting for this. I only present my findings as I've observed them. I don't go any further than that. I don't do what other people do, like that fellow at Archaics, and try to stitch together what happened, because I don't care. I don't care. What happened 12,000 years ago in Atlantis is of no interest to me. The life's work of Graham Hancock is of no interest to me. Astrology is of no interest to me. Numerology is of no interest to me. Gematria is of no interest to me. Ghosts are of no interest to me. Angels are of no interest to me. Demons are of no interest to me. Dead human beings are of no interest to me. There's just nothing there. I study life and life alone. And life is spiritual. It has a physical expression. I'm in that physical expression now. And using all the trappings of the technology present to us to communicate with you, you few, we happy few. Many a kilometer apart, different time zones, different parts of the world. And here we are talking as though we know each other. And let's be honest, with an intimacy that most of us can't achieve with our families. And this is the nature of spiritual intimacy. It is the highest form of intimacy. And it's interesting that it has no responsibility. I don't pay for you, you don't pay for me. I'm not going to go to your funeral, you're not going to go to mine. But this is the highest form of intimacy. Family, really, in this part of the journey we're living in, the early 21st century, family is really just your karmic bottlenecks. You know, the debt you have, the life debt you have from previous lives, and what you owe and what you're deserved, and settling of accounts. But spiritual intimacy is something different. It's more joyful. There's more alacrity in it. There's more immediacy in it. There's nothing I love more than a good 60-minute conversation with somebody who can think and perceive, and who's living in the moment, and who has overcome the fear of social trappings and social consciousness, and can speak fearlessly about the time that we live in. These people are a joy and a delight to me, and most of you, my listeners, are like that. And so it's a joy and a delight for me to do this podcast and get to know you, and to be able to touch you, and to be able to interest you, and to be able to hold your attention. This is a tremendous pleasure to me, and it's a spiritual pleasure, which is a beneficial pleasure, not a derogatory or a degradatory pleasure, like eating sugar or drinking alcohol, or it's an uplifting pleasure. And I find at the stage of life I'm at now, the age and the years, this is what I seek. It makes me feel useful. It gives me that conceit, that pretense. But I will yield this. The reality we live in is very mathematical. In fact, the entire thing, the physical, the astral, the causal, and the mental, is a mathematical construct. You don't really let go of the math until you get into the spiritual regions. It's all a mathematical construct. And 3-3 repeating and 6-6 repeating and 9-9 repeating are important because those are the only gaps in the system. So everything else closes out. I mean, even if a string of numbers after a decimal point go to 1,000,000, 1,000,000 numbers, which it would take a supercomputer to calculate, but 1.147, and if those numbers after the decimal point went as far out as 1,000,000 numbers, it would still eventually close. And in reading those 1,000,000 numbers, you would be able to understand the content of the moment they define in our realities: physical, astral, causal, and mental. And everything distills down to the physical because the mental, causal, and astral exist to inform and define the physical. So the physical is the stage. The direction and production are the dimensions that we can't see. That's where the producers and the directors are, and the writers. And you're a part of those things, but you're unconscious to it. You're a part of the production of your own life. You're a part of the direction of your own life. You're a part of the writing of your own life. But most of us forget when we come into the density of life. And so for those of you who have spent a considerable amount of time in the mathematics of it, which I think is ridiculous, to be honest with you, I think people who do this are just ridiculous, and across the board. And I think a lot of times it's because they don't have the courage to speak from their heart. Right? And they've been seduced by the rationality of the black box. But when they speak about irrational things using rationality as a crux, it adds a layer of comedy and irony to it. Takes a special sense of humor to see it and laugh at it. I have such a sense of humor. So the 3, 6, 9 repeating is where new energy can come in to this reality. And it's like the Joker in the deck. And the 3, 6, 9 can be used to great advantage by very many people: scientists, magicians, wizards. Tesla went on and on about it. He said most of the stuff he did could be explained by 3, 6, 9. Okay? And they have to be repeating. But like I said, don't lose any sleep over it, because the mathematical aspect of our reality is stupid, and you're not going to get out of here thinking mathematically, because the density of the thought will keep you trapped in the net. You see, it's like a monkey jar. Sometimes there's people out there that we all respect, and they go on and on with these elaborate podcasts, and they're trapped in this black box rationality. And sometimes they think they're outside the black box, but they're not. They've just convinced themselves, like a schizophrenic convinces themselves they're not hearing voices. So it's amusing. And I'm going to segue here into the Christ. I don't know why, because the moment demanded it. So it just popped in. It's the natural segue about what I just said. Anyways, going back. By the way, the title of this podcast is The Rule You Followed, so remind me to get back to that. I'm talking to myself. Bruce, remind yourself to get back to that, the rule you followed. If the rule you followed led you to this, of what use was the rule? I find myself thinking about the Christ more these days. I was born to a family that worshipped the Christ, Roman Catholics, Scottish Roman Catholic, a particularly virulent form of Catholicism. The boldness of that statement, footnoted by Mel Gibson. Need I say more? Or should I say colonial Scottish Catholicism, Australian colony or the Canadian colony? I found little use for it from the age of 15 onwards, and 90% of the time I have nothing but contempt for it in my adulthood. Even though I know contempt is unhealthy for my mind and my heart. It's just my natural response to those black-robed fuckers. No offense to those who find succor and comfort in it. Okay? But it's just a kind of spiritual ice cream. If you keep licking it, you're going to become spiritually diabetic. Trust me. But the Christ is a different story. A different story altogether. And I don't know why this is coming to my mind now. There's nothing really prompting it. I'm not seeing any really compelling new material or new interpretations of it. I see the same old hesitancy to believe it on the part of intellectuals. I see some people embracing it, like Jordan Peterson, so on and so forth, championing it. Not always well, I might add. And then there's the perennial argument about whether the Christ really existed. And there's a very strong case to suggest he did not. Very strong case. And yet, there is something so undeniably powerful in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. A kind of complete and perfect distillation of the journey of man and the sort of triumph of man in the Christic consciousness. And that's what it is. It's they have all these expressions for different states of consciousness and the achievement of certain awarenesses in the Eastern systems, like yoga and Taoism and things like this. They got all these terms. It's very almost scientific. They get a little bit into the math brain, but these things are fairly universal too. The problems. And the fact of Christ possibly not existing does not daunt me at all. You still have the Gospels to contend with and the perfection of their message and the championing of the highest virtue of all of us, no matter what our station, no matter what we think we know. And that is this fellowship, this unity, the Christ consciousness represents the attainment of a perception of life and the subtlety of it at the basest foundation, where once realized, you simultaneously realize that you are connected to everything in the life field. And to harm it is to harm yourself. And that's what I mean by the Christ. And if you go and you look at the other teachings, like the Buddhism, like the Taoism, like the Vedic yoga, like the Sikh system, Guru Nanak, like Sant Mat, like Sufism in the Islamic world, it's a universal consensus. It's universal. But nobody has articulated it more succinctly and more powerfully than the original Greek scribes who wrote Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, originally written in Greek, I might add. Now, Christ's words may have been recorded in Aramaic, but the first writing of the Gospels was in Greek. Now, the peripherals of the story are of little or no importance to me. Then you're starting to get into what I call the Christian math. And everybody loves the math. And the math is the proof of it all. Well, it's not, people just don't want to admit how illogical it is to love everything. And it is completely illogical when you perceive yourself as an individuated life that may have existence after the body dies, but you don't know. So your main struggle is to stay physically alive, which separates you from your connection from everything else, puts your interests first, even to the point where you may kill another equal creation to yourself, which would be another human being. I mean, for the most part, we let ourselves off the hook for killing animals, even for factory farming them and treating them horribly. Well, we have to do that. We need our protein. But this individuation and this failure to recognize the life field can lead to such a radical individuation that we will kill other human beings to survive. And that's the crux of the whole thing right there. Whether you go to the Himalayas and do belly breathing for 40 years and learn to levitate, or whether you try to live by the Christ in a modern Western society and be loving in a loveless and self-centered world, it's the same struggle. It's the same struggle for the Taoist wizard as it is for the Vedic yogi, as it is for the Christian layperson trying to get by in the world. We're all trying to achieve that commonality of experience, that realization that everything is connected, everything is everything. But it's nearly impossible for most of us. I gotta get a coffee. I'll be right back. Never ceases to amaze me the giant frogs and toads on the path to the front house to get a coffee. They all come out at night because that's where they do most of their eating. Yeah, hard pressed to see, unless it's raining. You're very hard pressed to see a toad or a frog in the daytime, but at night, man, it's about 25, 30 meters to the front house on a concrete path my son laid, and man, you can count like 8, 9, 12 toads and frogs, man. It's crazy. I mean, some of them are huge. They're like those toads you can you can get high from, apparently. I don't know how to do it, but you can take the stuff off their back and there's a process. I think Mike Tyson knows. Tyson would if you like the toad, you'll like my house because those toads are everywhere up here. And I got myself a coffee. And I tried to do the podcast earlier. I got like 25 minutes in and I just scrapped it. It was like the first 40,000 words of The Devil in Us when I was writing that. It just there's a mood or a spirit or a moment to do these podcasts, and if I try to force it, it just doesn't work. Very mysterious. And another thing I think about with the Christ is, why everybody hates the guy so much now, and hates Christians. And I mean, let's be honest, there's really a big hate going on for Christians now, and white Christians in particular. And I get it, though, in some measure. I mean, it's because we've bought into this siloed title, education, salary, point-based merit system that's almost Marxist, let's be honest. And the civil service is a very Marxist mindset. It's a very, very Marxist mindset. And which is ironic because we're a capitalist society, and it's all fueled by the individuals who can go out and make money. But we're in a quandary now, a real quandary. And this system is not going to hold. It's already, I mean, it's clearly being deliberately broken down, and it's all built on this Christ. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, there would be no Western civilization without the Gospels. We have to acknowledge that. And I think that if we're going to go forward, and maybe this is one of the reasons I'm thinking about the Christ so much. Maybe that's not really the part of my unconscious that is spiritual. Maybe it's the part of my unconscious that is philosophical. I don't know. I don't try to answer these questions, really. I don't get into the math of it. It just doesn't interest me at all. But I get the interest for some people, just like I get the interest with sports and everything. I'm really not interested in anything anymore except meditating and the derivatives therein, which are many and splendid. I like a little bit of TV, and I like a good movie from time to time, but I mean, everything that drives people, you know, sports, couldn't give a shit. Oh, did you see such and such a fight in the UFC? No, no. Oh, you'd have to pay me to watch that shit. Same thing with NHL hockey, NFL football, National Basketball League, baseball. You'd have to pay me to watch that shit. I don't. I can't understand what kind of loser would spend all that time wasted just following these sports, and you're not even playing them yourself. You're just watching people. It just strikes me as completely insane. And then the shit that women get into is equally insane, just equally crazy. Right? And all the while, according to the Gospels, we're supposed to be seeking out this realization that unifies everything so we can love our brother and our neighbor as ourselves. Because that's really what it's all about. And that I do agree with. And it doesn't matter to me whether the Christ even existed. Whoever penned those 4 Gospels was a genius, a spiritual genius. Doesn't matter whether Christ really existed, whether he was crucified. I suppose to certain people it matters, the salvation people. Oh, I'm saved because the blood of Christ liberates me. To be honest with you, I find that really fucking ghoulish. Really fucking ghoulish. We're right back into the animal sacrifices and the crown prince of buggery and infidelity, Solomon, right? And his big stone temple and killing the animals and his witchcraft and all the shit he got into. I mean, it's just crazy, man. The blood. The blood. I'll tell you something. I think I've said this before on the Teleman. I've said so many things now, I can't even remember everything I've said. I come here, I do my job, I do a podcast, I crank out my 50 minutes, and then I'm not keeping a record or an inventory of what I've said. Yeah, I don't think anybody, yeah, who cares really? If there's a chemical component to something that you consider to be spiritual, and by chemical I mean a plant, a liquid like alcohol or water or medicine or blood, anything that has a chemical body to it. Ayahuasca, ibogaine, psilocybins, THC, peyote, it's chemical. People say, "Oh, I had this incredible spiritual experience." What are you talking about? You took chemicals. Okay. How can it be spiritual if it's chemical? You mean you altered your consciousness in your brain with a chemical substance, which allowed you to see reality a little bit differently, no higher than the lower astral plane. And that's your definition of a spiritual experience? Doesn't make any sense to me. At all. And there's a lot of people now saying that this was the basis of the Christ as well, that it was a very psychedelic message, and that back in those days, everybody was doing drugs. And like stuff we don't even know about or do now. It's not because it's gone away, but just because I guess we've forgotten the importance of these things as the ancients understood them. And one of the examples I could give is snake venom. According to Amon Hillman, a classicist who has translated very ancient Greek to English, is saying that these dudes were all stoned, man. Stoned, so it's a chemical experience. It's not a spiritual experience. Okay? So I guess what I'm saying is that the Christ and the Gospels are a good rule. You know, go back to the beginning of the show. If the rule you followed led you to this, of what use was the rule? Well, the rule of Christ is a good rule. The rule is seek that which binds you all. The one commonality of the whole life field. All men and women living as brothers and sisters, loving each other as they love themselves. Well, I think that's a pretty decent goal. Whether it's achievable en masse, I don't know. I would say no. But it doesn't matter, because it's not meant to be a solution for society. It's meant to be a solution for individuals who undertake it. Okay? And I think that if you could come to that unity of consciousness where you see the interconnectivity of everything, I think that would be very beneficial when you let go of the body and what happens to you next. Yeah, I think there's all these inversions between the physical and the next world, which I hesitate to call spiritual, but let's call it psycho-spiritual. So I think the more you disambiguate from your individuality as a living being, like I'm Bruce McDonald, I'm this old, I've done this, and this, as opposed to just perceiving my life, breathing, and interacting with the people that love me, I think that the more you disenfranchise yourself from the individuality of your physical life, the more you individuate yourself in the other world. And the more you retain a sense of self that individuates you in the other world. And I think in the other world, a strong sense of self while you are physically alive, it immediately pretty much goes when you die. And because you haven't created or realized any higher sense of self, your life energy and your consciousness just goes into this fast-moving river, and it never really individuates itself. You just become a ball of impulses floating over there. It astounds me sometimes, the things that I can imagine, because that's a pretty horrible fate to imagine, the loss of your individual self and individual perception. But I feel quite convinced that there's a series of inversions between the physical and what comes next. And I think the greater your life here is in matter, the lesser it is in spirit. And I think people who preach prosperity doctrine and this nonsense, like Jews and Protestants, are crazy, man. I think they're absolutely crazy. I don't think God gives a rat's ass about the square footage of your house. Not a rat's ass, man. Or how much money your husband makes, or how big your wife's tits are. I don't think he cares. You know? It's bloody ridiculous the more you think about it. There's something about the time we're living in now, 2025. I told you that I felt this shift in the beginning of March. I don't know what it is. I will tell you this, it's bigger than an astrological cycle. Although it has an astrological kickoff, which is the beginning of a month or the end of a month and beginning of another month, which is very astrological. It's not astrological per se. It's just a tumbler that clicked to open a door to let something else in. The astrology may be the event or the key that opened the door, but it's not an astrological event. It's bigger than astrology. And it's forced me into these deeper contemplations where I look at life like an 18-year-old philosophy student. What am I doing? What's the purpose? Why have I put so much time into this? And I mean, I'm not saying those questions are not known. The answers to those questions are not known to me. They largely are. But I'm sort of reharvesting it and saying, yeah, these are all good decisions I made, and I am very happy with my life decisions. The old another great biblical line, attributed to this figure, the Christ, whether he existed or not. Okay. What should it profit a man if he gain the whole world but lose his soul? Well, what should it profit a man if he has a very, very small portion of this world but gains his soul or amplifies his soul? What's true in what's true in the original statement is true in the inverse as well, but we don't often think about that. And so the question that Anton Chigurh asks the Woody Harrelson character in No Country for Old Men is, if the rule you followed led you to this, of what use was the rule? And I'm asking the question because we've been following Christianity for a couple thousand years as Europeans, white Europeans. That's a long time. That's a long meditation on the Christ. That's a vast epigenetic cycle. It's almost bred into us now, the story of the Christ. Our grandparents, our great-grandparents, our great-great-grandparents, everybody had this one thing in common. It doesn't matter how they baked, whether they used a gas stove or fire. Doesn't matter what they ate or what kind of shoes they wore or how they buttoned shirts or how they produced fabric and linen, what kind of sheets they had on their bed in the 1700s, whether they had indoor plumbing or they pissed into a bucket and threw it out a window. We have this one thing in common, at least for the last 500 years since Gutenberg, and orally from the priestcraft for 1500 years before that. And it's this figure we call the Christ, whether he existed physically or not. And it's an appeal to a kind of unity consciousness. Communist in a, in a way, when you think about it, right? Spirituality, I guess, is always communist because we all bleed into one thing. We're all drops in the ocean of love and mercy. That's Kabir, by the way, the Anurag Sagar, the ocean of love and mercy. Great mystical poet. Around 1550 he lived. 1450 or 1550, I can't remember. Lived up in northern India. And he's quite literally my favorite spiritual figure, Kabir. Favorite. Okay? I don't know why that is. I don't know how a kid raised Catholic in Ottawa, Canada would find his way to a 500-year-old northern Indian mystic, but I did. And very young, in my early 20s. And the dude just spoke to me, man. Kabir. Look him up. Very interesting guy. The God's weaver, they called him, because he was a weaver for a living. You know, he wasn't a renunciate. He didn't live in the jungle. He actually was married, had a family, and he wove like rugs and stuff. That's how he made his living. So I guess the question becomes, if the rule we followed was the Christ, how did we end up in usury, fractional reserve banking, compound interest, derivatives, swaps, futures, shorts in the financial market? How did all this come about? How did all this math, all right, all of this astrology, all of this computation creep into the simple purity of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John? Love your neighbor as yourself. Okay? How did we go from being a Christian society in which the Christ, whoever he was, whether he even existed, and it doesn't matter, the Christ who says it will be as difficult for a rich man to get into heaven as it will be for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle. How did we go from that to 401ks, registered retirement savings plans, competing with our neighbors, to, all of this nonsense, all of it? It just kind of crept in, didn't it? This abject materialism, this rampant cupidity, and it's vulgar. And clearly you can understand that I've rejected it. I mean, if I have $20,000 or $30,000 in the bank at any given moment, it's a miracle. Okay? I mean, I live bare bones. I don't care. I don't need $1 million in retirement savings to feel secure. It just amazes me. And then all of these people think that they're good. When every indication we've received from the people who really were good and made sacrifices for all of us, like Kabir, and who told us how to live and what to seek in life, what is worth pursuing, what rule you should follow. And we were given good instruction in the Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And yet we've ended up here. Like, it's mind-boggling when you think about it. Mind-boggling.
You go to hell.
All right. Let me ask you something. If the rule you followed brought you to this, of what use was the rule?
You could have the money, Anton.
If the rule you followed led you to this, of what use was the rule? I don't know for sure. Which is why I follow my own rule. And my rule is very similar to the Christ's, whether he existed or not. And that is to seek a unity consciousness, a sense of self that is connected to all life. Right? To unify the life principle in my consciousness and to feel confederacy with all living things and to feel it, not to conceptualize it. Like, a biochemist might be able to give an awkward poetics on the connectivity of life at a cellular level or something. It's not the same thing. You got to feel it. If the rule you followed led you to this, of what use was the rule? I'm Bruce McDonald, and this has been the Talamanca Review.